Today, we're tackling something pretty huge, something a lot of you might be grappling with right now, writing a thesis.
Yeah, a big one. We've heard from listeners asking for some structure, some guidance.
Exactly. So we dove into a really solid resource, How to Write a Better Thesis, by David Evans, Paul Gruba, and Justin Zobel.
And this book is, well, it's based on their actual experience working with tons of research students. It feels very practical.
It does. They share examples, sometimes fictionalized a bit for privacy, but it makes the advice feel really grounded, you know?
Totally. Like having experienced mentors guiding you through it because they write in the first person, it's quite approachable.
So our mission today, basically, pull out the key stuff from this book, how to structure your thesis, what examiners really look for.
And hopefully how to get through it without feeling completely buried by all the detail.
Right. We want you to produce something strong, something successful.
Okay, so first things first. The book makes a really interesting point right at the start about the core purpose of a thesis. It's not just about the research itself, is it?
Not primarily, no. I mean, the research is obviously crucial.
Of course. But they argue, pretty convincingly, I think, that fundamentally a thesis is about passing an examination.
Passing an exam. That kind of reframes it, doesn't it?
It does. It's your ticket, basically.
Yeah.
It demonstrates you're ready to join the community of scholars in your field. That's the bottom line.
Your key to the academic club. I like that. So, based on the book, what exactly is a thesis then? And what are these gatekeepers, the examiners, actually looking for when they read it?
Well, the book defines it by a few key things. First, it has to make a distinct contribution to knowledge.
Okay, something new.
Yeah.
Or maybe a new interpretation.
Exactly, or originality or interpretation. Second, you need to show you can communicate effectively within your field, like internationally even.
Right, clear communication is key.
And third, it has to be a rigorous, sustained piece of work. It proves you've done your time, you've completed your research apprenticeship.
Okay, contribution, communication, completion of apprenticeship. Got it. But flipping it around, from the examiner's viewpoint, what are they using as their checklist?
They're essentially looking for those same things. Has the candidate shown authority in their subject? Have they really completed that apprenticeship? Can they communicate clearly?
So it's less about just, ticking boxes and more about showing you're ready to be a peer, a future scholar.
Precisely. The book puts it really well. The big unspoken question examiners are always asking is this person fit to be admitted to the community of scholars? Everything else kind of flows from that.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. Now, the book also mentions some specific questions, I think 8 of them, for doctoral theses specifically, from some website.
Yeah, they quote 8 questions. They don't name the source, but the questions are insightful. Number 7, for instance, really zooms in on the quality of the writing itself.
Back to communication.
Right, and how it connects to international research communication. It highlights just how vital clear writing is. And number 8 is the big picture one overall quality, original contribution.
So it's not enough to have brilliant ideas locked in your head. You have to get them onto the page effectively.
Couldn't have said it better. And beyond those specific questions, examiners are also looking for, critical thinking, insight. Can you objectively appraise your own work?
Okay, critical thinking, objective appraisal. Makes sense. Now, this book is mainly focused on PhDs, right?
Primarily, yes. But the authors make it clear that the principles, the core ideas, they apply just as well to honors or master's level theses.
Good to know.
Though they do note the terminology can differ, thesis versus dissertation, depending on the country or institution.
Right, okay. Something else the book suggests, which sounds potentially really useful, is trying to look at actual examiners' reports, like getting a peek behind the curtain.
Oh, definitely. If you can access them, even anonymized ones, it can be incredibly revealing. You see what examiners actually comment on, what they focus on.
And maybe what they ignore.
Exactly. That can be just as useful. But the book also points out there's quite a bit of variability.
So they're not all looking for the exact same thing.
Not necessarily. Reports can differ quite a lot in detail and focus. But even seeing those differences can teach you something about the process.
Interesting.
They even suggest searching academic databases for studies about thesis examination. Keywords like thesis quality, doctoral assessment, that sort of thing.
Wow, meta-research on thesis examining.
And there's a summary of examiner feedback in an appendix in the book itself, which is handy.
That sounds incredibly valuable. But the book also adds a note of caution, doesn't it? About not assuming a single standard.
Yes, that's crucial. Expectations can really vary. Between universities, between different fields, even between supervisors. There's no one-size-fits-all checklist.
Okay, understand the examiner, but know that examiners differ. Got it. Let's shift gears to actually, well, starting. The book really gets that starting a huge project like this is intimidating.
Oh, absolutely. They use a great analogy. It's like building a house versus building a bookcase.
Right. Much bigger scale, more complex.
Exactly. You might not know where to even begin. It's
Yeah.
often totally unfamiliar territory.
And it's not purely logical, is it? The book stresses the creative side of research, too.
Mm-hmm. A lot of guides focus heavily on the rational bits, the methodology.
The spreadsheets and stats.
Right. But research also involves inspiration, new ideas, maybe finding creative solutions to tricky problems. It's a mix.
A blend of logic and, well, creativity.
Oh.
But even if you're taking a really innovative approach, the book says you still need to keep those examiner's criteria in mind.
Yes, absolutely. Even if your thesis looks different, you still need to build a solid academic argument.
Supported by evidence, clear writing.
Exactly. You can't just ignore the fundamentals. Knowing the criteria from the start helps make sure you're actually hitting the target, even if you take a scenic route.
Okay, makes sense. So, given all of the examiners, the mix of logic and inspiration, what kind of basic structure does the book suggest is a good starting point?
They outline what they call a standard structure. It typically starts with an introductory chapter.
The handshake with the examiner.
Pretty much. It needs to clearly state the problem you're tackling, your aim, the scope, like the boundaries of your study.
What you are and aren't covering.
Right. And then a brief outline of how the rest of the thesis is organized to get you to that aim.
Seems logical. But they also say you need good reasons for your structure, right? Not just copying a template blindly.
Precisely. It's not just about having an intro because you're supposed to. Your chosen structure needs to actually serve your argument. You should be able to justify why you've organized it that way.
Okay, structure is the skeleton. Now, the mechanics and public actual writing, computers have changed things massively, haven't they?
Oh, hugely. Word processors are lifesavers for big documents like theses.
All those features. Consistency, numbering.
Bibliographies, indexes, things that would be a nightmare to manage manually on that scale. They really help maintain a professional look and save tons of time.
Definitely. And speaking of bibliographies, the book really emphasizes how important referencing is. It's more than just a technical detail.
It really is. They say how you handle your references is a key signal to examiners about whether you're ready for the scholarly community.
Like, are you playing by the rules?
Exactly. Sloppiness, missing citations, citing things wrong, it undermines your credibility. It's about academic integrity, respecting the work that came before.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, but giving them credit.
Precisely. The advice is, be systematic from day one, collect references carefully, always be aware of correct citation.
And check your own work.
Yes. They suggest reading your draft like an examiner would, checking every single citation against the reference list. And a key point, only list sources you actually cite and make sure every citation has a full entry in the list, no orphans or extras.
A closed loop. Makes sense. Beyond references, what about the overall look and feel, the formatting?
Consistency is key there too. Headings, captions, paragraphs. Keep it standard throughout. It just makes the whole thing look professional and easier for the examiner to navigate.
It makes their job easier, which is always good.
Templates in word processors are really helpful for achieving that consistency.
Okay, consistent format. Meticulous references. What are the basics, spelling and grammar? Easy to let slip when you're deep in the research.
The book says definitely use spell checkers.
But don't rely on them completely.
Exactly. They're great for typos, but they'll miss correctly spelled but wrong words or proper names. Consistency is crucial. Again, pick a style like UK or US English and stick to it. And spell check is no substitute for actual proofreading. You need human eyes on it.
Right, technology helps, but doesn't replace careful reading. What about visuals, tables, and figures? How do you make those effective?
Find good examples in your field and imitate them. That's the main advice.
Learn from the best.
Yeah, and make sure they're reasonably self-contained. Clear captions, clear headings, so someone could basically understand them without reading paragraphs of text around them.
Okay.
Keep the style consistent within the figures too, labels, fonts, etc. They even mention Edward Tufte's books as great resources for visual communication principles.
Ah, Tufte's, yes. Classic. What pitfalls should people avoid with visuals?
Definitely avoid careless, low-quality line art. And especially inappropriate clip art, it just looks unprofessional and can undermine the whole work.
Right, no cheesy graphics.
Good illustrations take time, just like good writing, drafting, thinking, revising.
Treat them seriously. Okay, managing the actual document, the file itself is a big deal too, isn't it? Saving, backups.
Oh, critical. Save frequently, use autosave if you have it, and regular backups are non-negotiable.
Multiple places.
Yes. Separate storage, external drive, cloud, institutional server, whatever, multiple safety nets. They also suggest printing drafts periodically. Sometimes you spot things on paper you miss on screen.
Interesting tip.
And crucially, create explicit versions before major revisions. Use clear file names with dates. Avoid things like thesis final really final draft 2.docx. It just leads to chaos.
Been there. Okay, solid practical advice. Now, writing style. The book talks about theses. What on earth is that?
It's their term for that dense, overly complex, jargon-filled writing style some people adopt, maybe subconsciously, to try and sound impressive.
Academic waffle.
Basically, yeah. Sentences that are so convoluted you can barely figure out what they mean. Often the writer might not even be sure. It aims to obscure, not clarify.
We've all read stuff like that. What about active versus passive voice, that old debate?
The book strongly advocates for active voice where possible, mainly for clarity.
It's clearer who did what.
Exactly. Passive voice has its place, but active is generally more direct, concise, and easier to understand. They show a good example of revising a passive sentence into active voice, and it's much clearer.
Clarity is king. What about using I or we, first-person pronouns in a thesis?
It's nuanced. Historically, some sciences avoided it for objectivity, but in humanities and social sciences, it's often more accepted, even encouraged sometimes, especially when discussing your own process or interpretations.
So it depends on the field, and maybe the examiner.
Right. Be aware of conventions and maybe your supervisors' or examiners' preferences. Some might be more old school. The book gives an example of using we to mean the writer and the reader, which can work well, but definitely avoid using it inappropriately, like taking credit for others' work.
Use it judiciously. Makes sense. Punctuation gets a brief mention too.
Just a few points relevant to academic writing, like using commas correctly in complex lists to avoid ambiguity. And the difference between dashes and hyphens, they have distinct jobs, small details, but they matter for professionalism and readability.
Little things add up. What about word choice? The book has an interesting take on repeating words.
Yeah, they argue that in academic writing, precise repetition of a key term is often better than using lots of different synonyms just for variety's sake.
Because synonyms can be slightly different. Introduce ambiguity.
Exactly, especially in technical fields. Using 5 different words for the same concept can just confuse the reader. Stick with the precise term if it's the clearest. Consistency over fanciness.
Good point. They also mention repair words. What are they?
These are phrases we often use in speech while thinking, like in terms of with regard to aspects of. They can clutter up written text, make it less direct.
So try to weed them out for more concise writing.
Yeah, be mindful of them. Tighten it up.
Okay. And finally, in this mechanics section, the crucial topics. Plagiarism and research integrity.
Absolutely fundamental. Know your institutions and disciplines rules inside out. Conflict of interest, authorship, data handling, and obviously plagiarism. You have to adhere to these ethical standards rigorously. It's non-negotiable.
Okay, that covers the nuts and bolts. Let's move to making a strong start and actually developing your argument.
Yeah.
The book really pushes for writing early, doesn't it? Not leaving it all to the end.
Oh, definitely. They argue starting to write early, even right at the beginning, is hugely beneficial.
Why is that?
Well, it helps clarify your own thinking. It forces you to pin down ideas that might be vague. It helps identify what research processes you actually need to do.
And you get feedback earlier.
Exactly. Plus, it avoids that terrifying feeling of facing a mountain of writing right at the deadline.